Hello, this is Scott Herbst, president of Six Flex Training and Consulting, and you are watching or listening to The Flex, a conversation show where we talk with people who are expressing leadership with the intention that it give you access to expressing yours. I am really excited to have on the show today Dr. Angela Hess. Dr. Hess is founder and director of Applied Behavior and Learning Consultants, and they provide in-home and community-based services in Maryland. I am going to keep the introduction really short so that you can hear more of the story from the person who is living and creating it. Angela, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Scott. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, how are you?
I'm doing good. Yeah, it's a busy week, but I'm doing good. Yeah. How are you?
I was telling you before we got on, I'm actually just a little bit nervous today. Uh,
Right?
so, and happy to be sitting here talking to you. It's great to be with you and your big bright smile. So
Thanks.
let's get into it. So, where I always love to start the show is by having you just share anything you want to about your story, and particularly, what was it that had you start your own business, things like how long you've been in business, but also how you've grown and, both in terms of your business, but as a person in your journey. So I know that's a big, wide open question, but
Yeah,
yeah.
sure. So I started my business. Well, I officially started in 2017, but really didn't get it going for till 2018 because it takes a while to get credentialed and get everything
Yeah.
moving. But yeah, I've been in the field for a really long time now. And I'd worked after I got my BCBA, I worked for a few different companies. And one of the last places I worked was actually was a startup by a large healthcare company. And unfortunately, it just ended up being a really poor experience, and it was really toxic. And uh, it really just motivated me to finally to do what I'd kind of been dreaming about for a while of having my own company. I'd started the work to do it all, and then I worked for this other place for a while. And just one day I was finally like, this is it. It's time to make the leap and to do it. So yeah, so I really wanted to do something that was, I think, a little bit different. A lot of places I worked had that kind of toxic over culture at some place or another. Not all of them,
What is
but a lot.
yeah, when you
Yeah.
say a place was toxic, tell me a little bit more about that, what that means to you.
For me, it was just really um, a lack of good personalities and relationships. There was always, kind of that one person, and a lot of times it was a supervisor who just
Mm.
really was not supportive and was just so wrapped up in, I don't know, whatever they were doing, that it
Yeah.
really just created such a downflow to everything and everybody. And it was never just me that saw that. It was something that really just infiltrated down to our RBTs and our one-to-one staff. And I felt like that really, it was so often affecting the clients. It was creating such a high turnover rate. And no matter how much I put up with, it really wasn't making much of a difference down the road because I couldn't be enough of a barrier for everything there. And so I really wanted to create something,
Mm.
one, so I could have more flexibility to do what I wanted and to maybe eventually spend more time with my family, which I did get to do. If startups are crazy, but eventually I got there. But
Yeah.
my dream really for my what I wanted to create was a place that really supported people.
Mm.
I felt like by supporting the staff and creating a good, positive, collaborative environment, we would see those good outcomes because we
Yeah.
wouldn't have the high turnover and our families would really value having and seeing all of that too. So I guess that's the summary to that. That's that question. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm curious about a couple things. Um, One thing I'm curious about is just because I'm sure what you're saying really resonates with people. and everyone's had a bad boss, I think.
Right, right.
If you've had probably a few different jobs you've had or seen that boss, like who, I remember my very first job out of undergrad. I actually had a really great boss who was really supportive, always looking for opportunities where I could grow. But I was in an organization where there were like four little teams, and I had friends on the other team whose boss was just really undercutting and demeaning almost.
Yeah,
And it really, you watched like her churn through different employees, right? Um, so I think that piece of your story is probably really relatable to a lot of people. And then it's probably also really relatable, that feeling of like, well, if I were doing this, uh, I would do it different. But the people who then take that leap are pretty rare. It's a pretty unique thing to actually say, well, I could do this better, and then to actually go do it. So, um, so here's my question. The long way of asking this question is what I'm interested in all the reasons that were like to not do this. And and then in the face of all those reasons, you know, how did you uh how did you take that leap?
yeah, yeah. I definitely. I'm sure it does resonate with so many people because I don't want to say if any of my former bosses. My first experience in ABA, I was so fortunate to have such an amazing, the most amazing bosses. So in case they're listening, I don't want them to think that I was ever talking about them. But since that time, I had not. And so
Yeah.
really a part of it was I wanted to be like that in my first
Mhm.
initiation. But I'd been saying it for a really long time and in a lot of places I'd worked. And I just never felt like I had the confidence to be able to do that. It seems so scary to go out on my own. I am the breadwinner for my family.
Yeah.
Um, and so it was terrifying to take that leap for me. And I think that definitely prevented me for a long time. I think if I was in a different situation, I might have done it a little bit sooner. Um,
Mhm.
but it was also just, I was in my PhD program and I was starting to work on ACT stuff. And I
Yeah.
was just really found that the more and more I was going through, what's important to me and what are my values and what do I really want to be, I just felt like I was having such a hard time doing my job in a place that didn't align with those values. Those values weren't the same.
Yeah.
The I've really felt, especially at the last place I was, that was it was really just a moneymaker for a larger company to see if they could make some money. And that was all it was about. They expected 100% um, performance. Like they were pressuring kids and families to have sessions when the kids were very sick. And I just couldn't do it anymore. And that was really the leap I had. Um, but it was, I in the beginning I was like, oh, I can do it better, right? I can. Everybody says that, and then I think a big challenge for me was realizing that one thing I was good at was like shielding people from the toxicity and trying to like be together in the trenches. And when you're the boss, you don't have anybody to throw under the bus anymore. You don't have anybody to blame. And so when things are going wrong, it's like, well, that's I can't blame the boss anymore because now I can, but that's me. That
Yeah.
I have to fix the problem now. I can't just complain about it. So that was a big, you know, not a necessarily a challenge, but a big realization for me about 6 months in. I was like, oh wow, yeah, that's on me now. There's nobody else to blame but me. So that was also a big growth point for me in the
Yeah.
beginning.
I want to talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but I'm interested because you said you started doing some work with ACT on your way to your PhD.
Mm,
Um, and that really connecting with your values had you, I don't know if you said this or if I inferred this, so correct me if I'm not getting it right. Um, but really connecting with your values had something to do with actually taking that leap, because you also said you were terrified, right? And
Yeah,
I would
definitely.
expect that as you were looking at, well, what's next, being an environment that really didn't work for you, that one option you had was to just go find the next agency to go work for, right? Because BCBAs are in demand. Um,
Yeah.
so how did
This,
connecting with your values, or you kind of shook your head there. Tell me about that.
well, so I am in, I think it was about 8 years ago. I'm in somewhat of
Okay.
a rural area, um,
Mm,
where it's growing, where there's a mid-sized small city nearby, and there's definitely way more ABA companies than there ever were before. But it wasn't that easy to just be able to go bounce to another company.
yeah,
Um, at the time, honestly. And I could have done that, but it would have involved more commuting and
yeah,
more things like that. But it really was that, kind of connecting with my values and really looking at what I wanted to be able to do. And one thing I'd always had other places to say when I started working in Maryland is, oh, she's different. They would send people out to be trained, and she does it differently. They were doing a lot of card sort things and just having kids sit at the desk and really old ABA.
yeah,
Um, and that was not how I was trained. I was trained on, generalization and net and,
yeah.
life skills and, all these things. And so I didn't want to be the anomaly at the place I worked anymore either. And just
Mm,
the few kids that I was seeing were getting what, not to toot my own horn, but what I felt like was better ABA.
yeah,
And so that's also, I wanted to just be able to, I recognized that I was making an impact when I started to talk to people that I had trained before and I'd been, and they're like, oh, you taught me everything I knew and you made such a difference. And that's the way I felt about my first supervisors, and I wanted to just continue that generational impact in a larger way. And I feel like I'm getting to do that now because I have all my BCBAs have been trained through me. So we don't grow fast, but we grow, and we're
yeah,
growing faster now. And I am able to create that kind of consistent impact across all of our clients, across our staff. And, for the most part, we're never able to completely remove toxicity or poor things that happen, but we're really able to support and take care of that in a much better way, I feel. So yeah.
awesome. I'm going to dwell a little bit more on the values thing.
Sure.
And if you were gonna, because it's one thing to say I really connected with my values.
Oh yeah.
If
Sure.
you were mentoring someone and they said, well, how do I do that? How do I connect with my values? What would you have them, where would you have them start to do that?
Yeah, I guess it would depend on, I mean, if they were like me and trying to learn about, if they were a student and trying to learn about ACT and wanted to do that, I'd probably point them into doing some more, some of the actual exercises, the values identification exercise. I was helping somebody practice for their dissertation, and they had us do a value sort activity just so they were
Yeah,
like probing out for their study. And as I was doing it, I realized, the things that I was identifying weren't necessarily the things that were I was able to live or I was living at that time.
yes,
And so much of my energy was going into work, and so much of my thoughts and stress were going into work, and I wasn't able to connect. I wasn't spending as much time with my family. I was driving a lot. I was working about an hour away. Again, being in a rural area, but
yeah,
I still drive a lot, but I'm able to to do it at different times. And um, I realized I wasn't. Health is another one of my values, and I was not able to be there because I had so much. The work situation just wasn't sustainable for me at that time anymore. So I think we pushed BCBAs too hard, And so I would really just guide someone through that conversation, like what is important to you, and I would try to help them um, identify their own values and then talk through the next step. Obviously, is committed action. What can you do right now to make, to help get towards that place if you feel like what you're doing isn't getting you there. um and yeah, I try to do a lot of that kind of mentorship with my staff and with our people coming up, of trying to make sure that they have that good balance, because I think that's just so important. If they're so dedicated to what they're doing at work, they're forgoing everything else. They're just obviously going to get burnt out, and it's all going to start to fall apart, or they're over focusing on work and driving everybody at work crazy because they're nitpicking on things. And so really just helping people, um, I'll talk them through that a lot, usually is how I help people connect.
Yeah, awesome. I'm gonna summarize that again. Correct me if I miss something. But you mentioned doing a value sort, and it
Yeah,
sounds like the sorting was one way of
right.
really looking at, well, what is it that's really important to you?
Yeah,
Is it like career? Is it family? Is it health? Is it fun, leisure, etc.? Um, so that would be look at that. Another piece mentioned was looking at, well, how am I living compared with that? And then from there, well, identifying what's an action I can take that will bring these two more towards alignment.
yeah,
Cool. I think that's something that anyone could probably actually sit down and start to do in about 15 minutes.
yeah. And that's what I just found myself doing every time because I was starting to use ACT more and more. And that's the whole
Yeah.
thing, is you have to, if you're going to use it, you have to live it. And I found
Yeah.
myself that, the more and more I was running through the exercise with myself as I was doing it, it's like, I gotta get this in order, and I had a document, even it was get it together on my computer. And, I was just trying to really like identify what was important and what goals I wanted to accomplish, um, to get there. Yeah.
Awesome. Is there anything you did just to keep that alive for yourself and to make it a practice?
I think it's just constant going back to it. I had a supervisee at the time who reminded me, he was into mindfulness, and so he was loving everything we were talking about with ACT. And he's like, it's like gardening, like if you let it go, the weeds are going to take over, and it's going to get really bad. And I love to garden. I have a big garden, and so it's just every time trying to continue to incorporate it into what I do, so that it
Mhm.
reminds me every time I teach, I'm an adjunct and I teach courses. And at least once a semester, I try to do an ACT exercise just to introduce it to the students. And so they get to hear about it if they've never heard about it before. And it helps me remember what I need to be doing
Yeah.
and keeping on track with my values and things. So I try not to flood myself with it, but I try to incorporate it and to continue using it in my practice. And it helps me stay on track, because obviously I get off track. Health is a big one for me, and that that comes and goes depending on injuries and life. But I always just try to keep back on track. And I know I feel better when I'm living I'm living by the things that are important to me.
Yeah. What do you do for your health? I'm curious.
I exercise pretty regularly. I try to eat well, but I do daily exercise. Sometimes I do harder ones, sometimes I do lighter ones. I'm getting older though, so I keep ending up having some kind of random injury that makes
Hmm.
me stop and gets off track. But I'm learning to also accept that and try to be more gentle with myself and find things that I can do that aren't so impactful. So, yeah.
Um, Thank you. One thing you also said is that your commitment when you started your company was that you really wanted to provide a supportive environment for the people who you work with. And it sounds like you get a lot of fulfillment from that.
I do, yes.
Um, and so I'm interested, I want to go down that path. one, well, like, how do you support people? You've already mentioned a couple, but I mean, obviously you're really intentional about it. Will you share something about that?
Yeah, so I think one of the big the first thing I decided off the bat is when I have, I definitely end up providing a lot more support to my individuals who are going to get their experience, to get their 1,500 hours, to get their BCBA, or 2,000 now, depending on their track. But
Right.
I also, just everybody, I try to encourage, um, if they haven't gone back to school yet, or they're wavering on whether they should go back to school, or I really just try to be that voice to tell them to do it, because I needed that voice. Somebody pushed me to do nearly everything I ever did in life. Somebody told me, "You should do that." And I was like, "Oh, yeah, I guess I should."
Yeah.
So I really just try to be that voice. I just attended graduation for one of my staff on Saturday. She invited me, and I really mentored her through um, getting through and passing her BCABA. And then she kept talking about she wanted to go back and get her master's, and I listened to it for 2 years, and it's finally like, well, you should really go do that. Like, go apply, go do it. And she did, and she just graduated on Saturday, and it really means a lot to me to see people growing, and to see well, just selfishly, we need more staff in the field. We need more people. This field is still severely under understaffed, especially in the area we're in. And but I really just like to support people and be that voice if nobody else is telling them to do it. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I just got present too. I want to share something about that because it had me think about times in my life when people have told me that, oh, you should do this, or I think you'd be really good at that. And sometimes they did that, and it was like it lit something up inside of me where I was like I know I like it didn't even occur as an option.
Yeah.
Um, a few years ago, like 15 or something, a long time ago now, um, I started doing stand-up comedy. And it was totally because someone said, "Oh, you should do stand-up comedy." And it had never even registered for me that it was something I wanted to do. But the moment they said that, I was like, "Yes," you know? And that was the impetus to go do it. And then I really enjoyed it for the time I was doing it, you know? But then there have been other times where someone said, "I think you'd be really good at that." And I was like, "Yeah, but I don't want to." But just them saying that, like, actually left me bigger.
Yeah.
Like, "Oh, wow." Like, yeah, I don't think that's for me. And just having them say that was an acknowledgement. And so you pointing that out got me present to that. And I really want our listeners to hear that because I think, well, I don't know. I'll say what's true for me is that I will live life with a concern for being pushy. And sometimes I can see that that concern would have me withhold little things like that that might then really contribute to people. So I just got present to that and what you were sharing and wanted to share that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's awesome. That's cool that you're the comedy thing. That's awesome. It's good to, I think, pursue passions of other things in this world. That's awesome.
Uh,
But yeah, I think it's sometimes people tell me things too, that you should do things, and I like to bake, and people are always like, "Oh, you should open a bakery," and I'm like, "No, that sounds like that would be
it's nice to
ruining
hear though, isn't it?
bakery." But thank you, I appreciate it. And you think my stuff's good. It is nice to hear, and I think it's yeah. I think a lot of times people are afraid to say something that because they don't want to be pushy, or they don't want to seem like seem that way. But I think it's important to tell people good things, and to give compliments, and to put that out there. It makes the world a better place, and I think it makes us a better people. It makes us like happier and more connected with with the things that are important. So I like
Um,
it.
awesome. I have a few more questions for you.
Yeah.
In a moment, we're going to turn the corner to look more towards the future. But before that, I know there's the things I've latched onto. Is there anything you want to share about your journey that I haven't asked about that you think would be really valuable for people to know?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I think it's there's hard times too, like the talk about it's, I mentioned it just briefly, but sometimes, you know, especially starting up a company, but anytime you're the one in charge, it can be really challenging, and it can be one of the questions you kind of like guiding and thinking about is like challenges I faced. And we definitely have had those where, it felt like things were not gonna go well. Even just earlier this year, we had a big transition with we serve a lot of Medicaid clients, and every
Yeah.
5 years our state transitions the contracts, and it was like we didn't get paid for months. And
Mm.
it was just really, really challenging to know if I was going to be able to continue to do everything.
Yeah.
Um, and so it, I think is as rewarding and all of those things are, is it's again, it goes back to like connecting with the values, and I think acceptance of that sometimes it's just going to be hard and it's not going to be rainbows, and I'm just going to have to really conserve and kind of protect and reduce what I'm trying to do and all the cool things I want to do during those hard times. But that most often they pass with, as long as we're doing things right and staying on it. So I think that's, yeah, it's like it can be really rewarding, it can be really wonderful, but it can be really, really challenging at times to find to find the energy and to f- to show up when maybe things aren't going so well. Because it's important to me to show up for everybody, but sometimes I
Yeah.
gotta also be honest and share that we're having, struggles and things. So yeah, I think that's the only other thing. Is be realistic with with what comes with it all.
Yeah. How do you um stay centered or stay connected and find the energy when circumstances are tough and it's easy to go down the oh my god, is this going to work out hole?
Yeah, I've really learned to just kind of unplug when I need to. It's I definitely value I value traveling and spending time with my family and doing other
Mhm.
things besides just focusing on work. As much as, like my hour or so of exercise is good for the daily,
Yeah.
I need more. And I definitely find it's maybe access that I can do it, but it really recharges me to take that time away and
Yeah.
to spend that time with my family and to or my friends, or doing those things and traveling. um but sometimes it's when things are, not that's not the place either. I also I like to share, the when I was first starting up, I was very much of the whole like, yay, I don't sleep and team no sleep and things like that.
Hmm.
But now I'm very much like, no, I need my sleep, and making sure I'm getting enough sleep. And
Yeah.
uh, that's so important to my mental energy and where I can be to show up if I'm not protecting myself there. It's really gonna just start to show up everywhere else. And so that's always I think how I just try to like shut down and focus on the essentials. And um I really try to stay ahead of things so that when things do start to fall apart, I can have a good like week or so before I really gotta buckle
Yeah.
back down and be able to do things like that. Yeah.
Well, what I'm hearing and what you're sharing, and I really want to underline this because I think a lot of people get the advice to, oh, like unplug, don't answer the emails after 5, etc. But what I'm hearing and what you're sharing is that you are actually making time to unplug and do those things that actually you care about. Like,
Yeah.
I'm passionate about travel and I really care about spending time with my family. And it's not just like unplugging and zoning out and watching a TV show. Like you're
Yeah.
not numbing yourself, you're actually engaged in things that are important to you outside of this other thing that's incredibly important to you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's for me, I find that, I do have that flexibility, not having to clock in, but, sometimes I'm up super early and that's when my energy hits. And I try not to send emails at 5 in the morning. I try to do other things until like people are awake. So they're not getting
Uh-huh.
things in their inbox. But,
Yeah.
I'll just bang out a whole bunch of work. And then there's other days where I'm
Yeah.
not there and I have to go unplug and do something different. And so yeah, it's a balance. I often end up taking my work with me, but I always find if I go on vacation and I take work, I find a drawer and I put my laptop and my phone in there. So my work phone so that I can check in when I need to check in, but the rest of the
Mhm.
time it's in the drawer and I don't have to focus on it at all. Um, so and sometimes I unplug completely, but that's more rare.
What's your favorite place to travel?
Maine. Um, we've been
Where
going
in Maine?
for I think this will be the fourth summer. We go up to Maine and there's actually an island off the coast that's not very well known. There's no roads. You have to take a boat or a plane to get there. So we go there.
Awesome. Maine's really beautiful.
Yeah.
Um, what is it, Acadia that's up there?
Yeah. Katie is about an hour north of where we go.
Okay,
My family doesn't like heat in the summer. And so we found a spot that's not mostly not hot.
cool. Um, then the next thing I'm really interested in is where are you headed next? And how do you see that you're going to have to grow personally to fill where you're headed next?
Yeah. Yeah. So, my company's growing. We have, we're really lucky. One of the local universities, Mount St. Mary's, we have a great collaboration with them. And they started a program a few years ago. So we have a more local ABA. So we're getting more graduates and we're getting more people. And it's growing fast. And so that's, I know, a huge challenge. I'm going to have to give up some more control and let other people do more things so that we can manage to take on um, enough people because I want to keep those people on.
Yeah,
And then, yeah, I have dreams to do other things like do some more CEUs and trying to spread that way. Try to do some research on the side to support the evidence behind the CEUs I want to do. But yeah, I think that's the cool thing about ABA and about, I don't have this big dream to be a giant company and take over, like a lot of clinics or get bought out or anything like that. I really just like to see where it grows organically, um, and see what comes along and kind of just ride that as it comes, as it seems to work so far. Um, but then sometimes the wave gets really big and I've gotta find some other supports there to make sure we're not getting crashed. So yeah, I think that's the big challenge for me is just trying to figure out a structure that's going to work and um, supporting more people to become bigger leaders and growing more and more BCBAs and how we can do that with fidelity to make sure that it doesn't um, get watered down. This is the best way to think about it.
yeah. I appreciate that you said that you're looking for at yourself and that you've got to give up some control. I know that's one thing that uh I know a lot of people struggle with that as they're growing their business, is to hand off some of the things that they're just so used to doing themselves.
Yeah, yeah, and it's happened for me a few times where I've been forced to. Um, a couple years ago, my father had a sudden heart thing, and I spent like 12 days with him in and out of the hospital and helping recover and all that. And it's like, well, okay, it's time for you to take this and you to take this. And
Yeah.
I just had him cover it and it worked out fine. And I think that's just for me too, as I don't want to put more on people. I'm like, oh, they already have enough to do. But so it's just like reorganizing and reshuffling, I think, as people, because I don't want to, I think I need to hire more admin, like for the hiring and all of those pieces. But yeah, giving up control is hard, I think, for a lot of people. Like I'm the oldest child. Everybody always told me I'm a little bit of a control freak. Um,
Yeah, I have that syndrome too, maybe.
yeah, but I think you have to in some ways to be able to get a business started and to get things going. Because otherwise it's you go really poorly if you're just like, yeah, it's fine, whatever. Um, but yeah, I think that's going to be the big challenge for me, is just and figuring it out, of just taking the time and investing in it too. Because that's another scary thing, is like the bigger we grow, paying other people to do things that I feel that I should be able to do makes
Yes.
me scared. And so I'm like, can we do this? And typically I realize we can, and I should just let it go. But I think that's a hard thing for small business owners to really too, is it's not just giving up control, but realizing I'm going to have to at some, making that financially feasible for a small company. So
Awesome. I have one final question for you.
yeah,
How can people reach you?
uh, they can reach out. We have our website that have a contact. My email is angela@appliedbehaviorlearning.com. Yeah, they can email me and reach out there.
Awesome. Or appliedbehaviorlearning.com. Fill out the contact form. Yes.
Yes, yes.
Awesome. I have so appreciated this conversation and your willingness just to be really open and authentic about what you have dealt with and what you're dealing with now in terms of where you see your business heading. And I know our listeners are going to get a lot of value out of this because you've made it seem like, oh yeah, yeah. You just hear the like, oh yeah, I deal with that too. And you've dealt with it to get where you are now. So thanks for showing up today.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Thanks for having me. It was fun to talk about myself for a little while.
Um, awesome. Thank you to our listeners for listening to the Flex. We will see you back here next time.